Dear Christopher, here is your friend Thomas the Tank Engine. He wanted to come out of his station yard and see the world. These stories tell you how he did it. I hope you will like them because you helped me to make them. Your loving Daddy.
Emily was enjoying life on the island of Sodor. She made lots of friends and worked her trains on the mainland like clockwork. Sir Topham Hatt was pleased.
You're getting on very well here. How would you like to pull the maintenance trains?
Emily was delighted. I'd be happy to, she said. So Emily pulled the maintenance trains all across Sodor. She helped direct the workmen on what to fix, and soon the rails were smoother than ever. The other engines noticed quickly. Amazing, remarked Percy.
You're a natural at this sort of work, encouraged James. Back when I pulled these trains, I never did half as good a job as you.
It just takes a little patience, said Emily modestly. That's all. Well, whatever it is, it certainly makes a difference, put in Thomas. All the engines agreed except one. Duck, the Great Western engine, steamed crossly in.
James, he accused, I know you don't like tedious work, but I expected more. My lines today weren't maintained at all. Why is it that you tender engines can't perform the simplest of tasks?
Excuse me, came a voice. Duck looked over to see an engine he'd never met before.
Is there a problem?
He said bluntly. Oh, there most certainly is, Emily snapped. Who do you think you are, prancing around with that attitude of yours? You don't determine what goes. Duck was taken aback.
I was under the impression that maintenance trains are supposed to maintain the line. If you think otherwise, be my guest. But no, when I crash spectacularly on these ratty rails, that's on you.
Emily was furious. I haven't time for no good stick in the muds like you. Goodbye. And she puffed right out of the sheds.
Looks like Duck's finally met his match, sniggered James.
After that, Emily didn't enjoy the maintenance trains as much. Whenever she saw Duck, they would argue and argue.
If you want a life on Sodor, you need to earn it,
Duck would say. Manners go a long way, too, Emily replied. But then you wouldn't know. They'd argue at the sheds as well, keeping the other engines awake at night. Finally, Emily lost patience. You know what, Duck? If you think I do such a poor job with my maintenance trains, you can pull them yourself.
Fine, said Duck. The rails will be smooth this way. You work my branch line and I pull the maintenance trains.
Deal, finished Emily, and the two headed off to switch jobs. Duck backed down onto the maintenance train.
This is child's play,
he snorted. The crew the next day had been new, so when Duck stopped at a railway line, they asked him what to do.
How should we approach this?
Duck wasn't sure, but he didn't care.
If the new engine can sort things out, how hard can it be? He thought. How about we take the rails first, then add some ballast from under?
Suits me, said a workman, and they did just that. Duck was pleased with himself.
I knew it would be easy, he chuckled. After all, I am a veteran.
Duck spent the whole day pulling the train up and down the line and guiding the workmen on what to do. Soon the last bit of rails had been tackled and Duck headed for home.
Child's play, he said to himself. Nothing more.
But Duck was wrong. He had, in fact, no idea what he had been talking about. Gordon was pulling the express. The wind sizzled around his boiler as he thundered down the track.
Hurry, hurry, hurry!
As he looked forward, he saw his line bent sideways.
Stop! Stop!
Gordon called. The driver shut off steam, but Gordon was going too fast. Gordon toppled off the line and skidded into a field.
The indignity, grumbled Gordon.
Later, Thomas arrived with the breakdown train. Bust my buffers! What a mess! Soon, Gordon was lowered onto a more stable part of the line. He was diverted onto a parallel track and went on his way. When Gordon arrived at the station, he told Sir Topham Hatt what had happened.
I see. I'll have a word with Emily later.
Emily and Duck were begrudgingly resting in the sheds when Sir Topham Hatt walked up.
Emily,
He said with anguish. Emily looked confused. Yes, sir?
I expected your work with the maintenance trains to be consistent, not drop off so suddenly. Your rushing got Gordon and his passengers off the rails.
Emily looked at Duck. Said my rails were ratty, you did. Said the veterans could manage better.
Oh yeah, well, they can do the important things, retorted Duck. Not mean I'll work like maintenance trains.
Then why did you do the menial work in the first place? To be a hypocrite of your word?
Silence! It seems that both of you are to blame for today's incident. Emily, Duck, I understand that you may not see eye to eye, but you must know your limits.
Emily and Duck went quiet.
I'm taking you off the maintenance trains for now, Emily,
Finished Sir Topham Hatt,
Thomas will pull them instead.
and he walked away. Neither engine spoke until Duck broke the silence.
That cocky little engine never listens to advice. You might not know, but he'll do a worse job than me. I know it.
Emily smiled just a bit. He doesn't take his time either, she added. He hasn't the patience for this type of work.
He hasn't the patience for any work.
The two engines started to chuckle. At last, the two could agree on something. Duck and Emily may not be the best of friends, but ever since that fateful day, they found it wise to maintain a good rapport.
All the engines on Sodor are a bright, bold color, but this engine has been working in the coaling plant today and is covered in coal dust. How can you tell who it is? This engine has a round face and boiler. Do all the engines have round faces? No. Toby and Salty have square faces, so it can't be either of them. What else can you see? This engine has a separate coal tender at the back. Do all the other engines have separate coal tenders? No. Thomas and Percy don't, so it can't be either of them. Now look at the engine's funnel. It's very tall. What about the other engines? Do they all have tall funnels? No. Gordon and Henry have short funnels, so it can't be either of them. Who's left? James and Edward. James and Edward both have round faces, separate coal tenders, and tall funnels. It's time for this engine to have a washdown. What color can you see now? Red. So it can't be Edward. It must be James. Hello, James.